Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that affects so many people understanding and finding ways to manage anxiety and panic attacks.
Right. And we've gathered quite a bit of material for this research on things like CBT, panic disorder itself, articles looking at natural approaches, coping methods.
Yeah, and even some really practical insights shared in an online community, which I think adds a great perspective.
Definitely. So our goal here is really to sift through all this, pull out the key knowledge, and hopefully offer a clearer picture of what's going on with anxiety, especially panic attacks, and some, actionable strategies.
And it's so common, isn't it? The sources highlight just how many adults deal with anxiety disorders every year. It's huge.
It really is. And while general anxiety is part of it, today we're really zooming in on that specific, often quite frightening experience of a panic attack and also panic disorder.
Okay, so let's start there. What exactly is a panic attack based on the definitions we looked at?
Sure. So the DSM-V criteria describe it as this: abrupt surge of intense fear or intense discomfort. It comes on really quickly.
An abrupt surge. It sounds intense already, and it comes with specific symptoms.
Oh, yeah. It's not just the feeling of fear. It's accompanied by a whole cluster of physical and cognitive symptoms. Things like your heart pounding or racing, sweating, trembling or shaking, sensations of shortness of breath, maybe feeling like you're smothering or choking. Chest pain is common too, or discomfort, nausea, dizziness, feeling lightheaded or faint.
Wow.
Yeah, and other things like numbness or tingling, chills or hot flashes, and these really strange feelings of like unreality or being detached from yourself, depersonalization, derealization.
That sounds incredibly overwhelming physically and mentally. What's actually happening in the body to cause all that?
Well, what's fascinating and kind of key to understanding this is that these intense feelings are actually the body's natural fight, flight, freeze response going into overdrive.
Ah, the survival response.
Exactly. It's designed to protect us from real danger, like facing a predator back in the day. It floods your system with adrenaline to help you escape or fight.
But with a panic attack, there's no actual predator.
Right. That's the tricky part. The alarm system gets triggered powerfully, but often in the absence of any obvious external threat. It's like a false alarm, but it feels incredibly real.
Okay, so it's a false alarm. And if those alarms keep going off unexpectedly, that can lead to panic disorder. How's that defined?
Precisely. Panic disorder isn't just having a panic attack. It's experiencing recurrent, unexpected ones. And critically, these attacks are followed by at least a month of persistent worry.
Worry about having more attacks.
Yeah, either worry about having more attacks or intense worry about what the attacks mean, like fearing you're dying or losing control or going crazy. And this worry leads to significant changes in behavior, trying to avoid anything that might trigger another one.
And that avoidance, that links into agoraphobia, doesn't it?
It often does, yes. Agoraphobia is related. It's a distinct fear or anxiety about certain situations because you worry that escape might be difficult, or help wouldn't be available if you did have panic-like symptoms, or a full attack.
What kind of situations?
Oh, it can be quite broad. Things like using public transport, being in open spaces like parking lots, or enclosed spaces like shops or theaters, standing in line, being in a crowd, or even just being outside the home alone.
So people start avoiding these places.
Yes, they tend to actively avoid them, or they endure them, but with intense fear and distress. Sometimes they feel they need a companion, a sort of safe person, to go into those situations.
The numbers you mentioned earlier, it really drives home how many people experience this. Over 22% having just a panic attack at some point.
Yeah, even without the full disorder. And then panic disorder itself, with or without agoraphobia, affects a smaller, but still significant percentage. We're talking millions of people grappling with this.
So this leads to a really important question, something the CBT model helps explain. How does one intense, but ultimately temporary panic attack sometimes spiral into this ongoing panic disorder?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does that single false alarm become this state of constant alert?
Yeah.
Well, the model suggests it starts with those initial physical sensations, the alarm reaction. Heart racing, feeling breathless, dizzy, the things we listed.
Okay, the physical stuff happens.
Right. But the crucial step is the interpretation of those sensations. Instead of thinking, oh, wow, my heart's beating fast, maybe I'm stressed or had too much coffee, the thought becomes catastrophic.
Catastrophic, like,
My heart's racing, I must be having a heart attack. Or
Yeah.
I feel dizzy, I'm going to faint right here. Or I can't catch my breath, I'm suffocating.
so it's the meaning you attach to the symptom that escalates everything.
Exactly. That catastrophic misinterpretation dramatically ramps up the fear. And then you get this vicious cycle.
Ouch.
Well, the increased fear intensifies the physical symptoms. More adrenaline, faster heart rate, etc., which then seems to confirm the catastrophic thought. See, it is getting worse. I am having a heart attack.
Okay, see the loop.
And then you become hypervigilant. You start constantly scanning your body, looking for any hint of those sensations returning. This creates anticipatory anxiety, the fear of the next attack, which just keeps your whole system on high alert.
So once you've had that really scary experience and interpreted it catastrophically, your brain is kind of primed to see danger and perfectly normal bodily fluctuations.
That's a great way to put it. One source used a really good analogy. Imagine two hikers in the woods. One gets warned, hey, there might be a bear around here. The other doesn't get the warning.
Okay.
The hiker who got the warning is now super alert. Every twig snap, every rustle in the leaves sounds like it could be the bear. They're tense. Maybe they even decide to leave the woods. The unwarned hiker hears the same rustle and thinks, oh, probably just a squirrel, and carries on enjoying their hike. That first panic attack is like the bear warning. It makes you hyper aware and likely to misinterpret harmless internal rustles.
That really clarifies it. That makes so much sense. So given that cycle, are some people more likely to get caught in it? What about risk factors?
Yeah, the sources do point to several factors that can increase vulnerability. Genetics play a role. Having a family history of anxiety disorders. Something called anxiety sensitivity is important too.
Anxiety sensitivity. What's that?
It's basically being inherently more fearful of the physical sensations of anxiety itself. Those feelings are dangerous or harmful.
Got it.
Other things include major stressful life events, a difficult childhood history like experiencing abuse or neglect, certain medical conditions, interestingly like asthma, have links, and substance use, including smoking, is also identified as a risk factor.
Okay, so we've established how central those catastrophic thoughts are. Let's maybe dig a bit deeper into what those thoughts actually sound like. The sources mentioned common themes.
Absolutely. This is where the mind really takes flight, interpreting those physical feelings in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
They often fall into a few main buckets. One big one is fears about death or disability.
Like thinking it's a medical crisis happening right now.
Exactly. Thoughts like, am I having a heart attack? Am I going to suffocate? Is this a stroke? I'm going to die. Direct, terrifying interpretations of things like chest tightness or breathlessness.
Yeah, I can see that. And what about fears of losing control?
That's another major category. Fears of losing mental control or behaving erratically. Thinking things like, I'm going to lose it and start screaming, or I'm having a nervous breakdown, or if I don't get out of here, I'll go completely crazy.
That sounds terrifying too. Are there social fears involved as well?
Definitely. Fears of humiliation or embarrassment are very common. Thoughts like, everyone's looking at me, people will think something seriously wrong with me, they'll think I'm losing my mind, or I'm going to faint in public and be so embarrassed.
So it seems the mind just jumps to the absolute worst case scenario danger, losing control, social disaster.
Pretty much. The sources emphasize that these thoughts often involve vastly overestimating the probability of a negative outcome actually happening, and also catastrophizing the consequences, believing the outcome is not just possible but certain, and that it would be unbearable.
Okay, so if someone finds themselves in that moment, body alarming, mind racing with these catastrophic thoughts, what can they actually do right then and there? Let's shift to those practical, in-the-moment strategies.
Right, this is crucial. The sources offer several techniques to help manage the intensity when it hits. Breathing exercises are almost universally recommended as a starting point.
But specific kinds of breathing, yeah, not just breathing normally.
Exactly. It's about slow, controlled breathing. The basic idea described is deep, diaphragmatic breathing, breathing from your abdomen, not shallowly from your chest. So gently in through the nose, letting your belly rise, and then slowly, smoothly out through the mouth.
And counting can help, like the 4-7-8 thing.
Yes, counting can give your mind something concrete to focus on. Inhaling for, say, 5 seconds and exhaling for 5. Or the 4-7-8 method is popular. Inhale for 4, hold gently for 7, exhale slowly for 8.
And practicing this when you're not anxious is important, right? So it becomes more automatic.
Absolutely key. Practice makes it a tool you can actually access when you're stressed. But it's also important to manage expectations. One source made a great point. The goal of breathing during an attack isn't necessarily to make it stop instantly.
Oh, what is the goal then?
It's more about helping to regulate the physical symptoms a bit, maybe take the edge off that feeling of breathlessness or racing heart. It helps you ride the wave rather than stopping the wave entirely, which can feel counterintuitive, but is a more realistic aim in the moment.
That's a really helpful distinction. Okay, so breathing helps manage the physical intensity. What about muscle tension? That's often part of it too.
Yeah, progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR, is suggested for that. It involves systematically tensing specific muscle groups like your fists or shoulders, holding the tension briefly, and then consciously releasing it, noticing the difference.
So you learn what relaxation feels like by contrasting it with tension.
Exactly. It helps counter that physical clenching that often comes with anxiety.
Okay, breathing and muscle relaxation for the body. What about the mental side? Those feelings of unreality or racing thoughts?
That's where grounding techniques are really valuable. The idea behind grounding is to pull your attention away from the internal chaos, the fear, the catastrophic thoughts, the detachment, and anchor yourself firmly in the present moment in physical reality.
Finding an anchor. I like that. What are some examples? How do you do it?
There are lots of ways, actually. They often get grouped into categories. There are physical and sensory techniques. Things like really feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the texture of the ground, touching objects near you. What's their texture, temperature, weight?
Using your senses.
Yes. Using water can be very powerful. Running cool water over your hands, holding an ice cube, splashing cold water on your face. That sharp sensation can really cut through the fog. Focusing intently on sounds around you, noticing tastes or smells, even just gentle movement like stretching.
That's a great list. Are there purely mental techniques too?
Yep. Mental grounding techniques engage your brain in a neutral, focused task. Things like naming objects in a category, types of animals, colors, cities. Describing an object near you in minute detail. Simple memory games, counting backwards from 100, maybe by sevens if you want a challenge. Spelling your name or someone else's name backward.
Oh, interesting. Like giving your brain a different job to do.
Exactly. Reciting something familiar, lyrics, a poem, a prayer, or mentally walking through the steps of a mundane task like making tea.
And you mentioned soothing techniques as well.
Yes, these focus more on comfort and safety. Picturing loved ones, vividly imagining a place where you feel calm and safe, touching a comforting texture like a soft blanket, thinking about or interacting with a pet if one is nearby.
It sounds like there are many options to try. I saw the 5-4-3-2-1 method mentioned specifically too.
Yeah, that's a really popular and structured one. It guides you through using your senses systematically. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. It gives you a clear sequence to follow when your mind feels scattered.
That framework sounds really helpful. And the idea of carrying a small, familiar object.
Yeah, like a smooth stone or a piece of fabric. Something tangible you can focus on as a personal grounding tool.
Beyond these specific techniques, there was also mention of just accepting the attack, observing it. That sounds hard.
It does sound really counterintuitive, doesn't it? When you feel that intense fear, the instinct is to fight it, to make it stop. But sometimes fighting it just adds more tension and fear to the mix.
So what's the alternative?
Well, one approach discussed is acceptance and observation, acknowledging, okay, I'm having a panic attack right now, and trying as much as possible to just observe the sensations and thoughts without judgment, letting them be there, knowing they will pass.
There's a specific term for that, panic neutral approach.
Yes, exactly, the panic neutral approach. It involves observing the feelings, observing the anxious thoughts, but consciously deciding not to try and control it or fix it. Learning to sort of chill with the symptoms, as one source put it, understanding they're unpleasant but not dangerous, rather than pouring energy into fighting them.
That requires a big shift in perspective. Any other immediate steps people might try?
Repeating a simple mantra can help anchor you something like, this feeling is temporary, or I am safe, this will pass. Getting up and walking around, doing some light movement, can sometimes help dissipate nervous energy. Though, as noted, the initial increase in heart rate from exercise might feel tricky for some during an attack. Finding a quieter spot, if possible, or just letting someone nearby know what's happening, can also reduce the feeling of being alone with it.
Those are all really valuable tools for the moment itself. What about afterwards and thinking longer term about recovery and management?
Right, so immediately after an attack, it's common to feel quite drained, lethargic, maybe some muscle soreness from the tension, difficulty concentrating. The sources suggest the peak intensity might pass in, say, 30 minutes on average, but the after effects can linger.
And recovery isn't just about that immediate aftermath, is it? It's an ongoing thing.
Exactly. Long-term recovery is about prevention, building resilience, and really importantly, confronting the underlying fear that keeps the panic cycle going. And there are factors that can make recovery trickier, things like other medical conditions, medication side effects, ongoing substance use, poor sleep, too much caffeine, or other stimulants.
So identifying potential triggers seems like a big piece of the puzzle, being your own detective.
Absolutely. Self-reflection is key. What situations, thoughts, or feelings tend to precede an attack? Are there environmental stressors, work pressure, relationship issues? Paying attention to those patterns is crucial.
And maybe noticing those very early physical signs we talked about, like the first hint of breathlessness.
Yes. Catching those early warning signs, a bit of dizziness, chest tightness, can give you a heads up to use some coping strategies before things escalate fully. That awareness is really empowering.
Beyond triggers, what about building a generally supportive lifestyle? Routine seems important.
Hugely important. Good sleep hygiene comes up consistently. Getting enough quality, consistent sleep is fundamental for emotional regulation. Without it, everything feels harder.
And exercise again. It seems relevant both in the moment and long term.
Definitely. Regular physical activity is a fantastic stress reliever. It boosts mood through endorphins, helps manage overall anxiety levels. We saw this reflected in the community insights too, people finding that things like regular yoga or weightlifting really help build confidence and reduce anxiety over time. It's powerful.
Makes sense. What about diet?
That plays a role too. Staying hydrated, keeping blood sugar stable, big dips in blood sugar can actually trigger adrenaline, and making sure you're getting nutrients important for the nervous system, like B vitamins, omega-3s, magnesium. It's all part of the bigger picture of supporting your body and mind. Again, someone in the community mentioned diet as a key piece of their management plan.
Okay, this feels like a natural point to transition into the more structured professional treatments. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, comes up a lot. How is it presented for panic disorder?
CBT is really presented as a first-line, highly effective treatment. It's described as helping you build that comprehensive toolkit for managing panic, but within a structured therapeutic process.
And it targets those negative thought patterns and avoidance behaviors we identified earlier.
Precisely. The sources break down the treatment. It usually starts with psychoeducation. That just means learning about panic itself, what's happening in your body, the fight or flight response, and crucially, understanding the CBT model, how your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and behaviors all interact to maintain the panic cycle.
So just understanding the why is the first step, and educating family too.
Yeah, that can be really helpful so loved ones understand what you're going through and how they can be supportive without accidentally reinforcing avoidance, for instance.
Okay, after understanding the model, what's next?
A core part is cognitive restructuring. This is where you directly challenge those catastrophic thoughts. You learn to become more aware of your thought patterns, noticing when you're jumping to conclusions or overestimating danger. You monitor the link between thoughts and panic flare-ups, and then you learn skills to evaluate those thoughts more realistically.
How do you evaluate them if it feels so real?
By looking at the actual evidence, asking questions like, what's the evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? What's a more realistic or balanced way to think about this sensation? What's the actual probability of my feared outcome happening? The goal is to develop a more neutral, less fearful response to the physical symptoms themselves. Someone in the online community referred to this as thought work, actively challenging those anxious thoughts.
That sounds like hard work, but really crucial. Now, CBT often involves exposure therapy, which can sound intimidating. Can you break that down?
Yeah, exposure is a vital part of CBT for panic. And yes, it can sound daunting, but it's done gradually and systematically. There are a couple of main types. One is interoceptive exposure.
That's the one where you deliberately bring on the physical sensations you fear, like dizziness or a racing heart.
Exactly. It sounds completely counterintuitive, right? Why would you want to feel those things?
Yeah.
But the rationale is powerful. You do specific exercises like spinning in a chair to induce dizziness, or breathing quickly to mimic hyperventilation, or running in place to get your heart rate up at a safe, controlled setting.
To achieve what exactly?
The goal is multifold. One, to directly test those catastrophic predictions you have. If I get dizzy, I'll lose control. If my heart races, I'll have a heart attack. Two, and perhaps more importantly, it's about building tolerance and acceptance of the sensations themselves. You learn through direct experience that while uncomfortable, they aren't dangerous, and they do subside on their own.
Okay. And there was a crucial point about not using relaxation during these exposures.
Yes, absolutely critical and mentioned repeatedly. During interoceptive exposure, you should not use relaxation or distraction techniques. The whole point is to fully experience this sensation and learn that you can handle it without needing to immediately dampen it down. It's about learning to tolerate the discomfort. Like that community member said, sometimes you have to hurdle through it to learn it's okay.
Okay, hurdle through it. That's a memorable phrase. What's the other type of exposure?
That's imaginal and in vivo exposure. This focuses on gradually confronting the situations or places you avoid because you fear having a panic attack there. In vivo means in real life.
Like going to the supermarket or driving on the highway if those are feared situations.
Exactly. It's usually done using a fear hierarchy, starting with situations that provoke mild anxiety and gradually working up to more challenging ones. You go into the situation, stay there, and allow the anxiety to be present without fleeing.
And the goal here is also learning you can cope.
Yes, and learning that the feared catastrophe doesn't happen. But again, there's a really important piece here. Identifying and eliminating safety behaviors.
Safety behaviors, what are those and why eliminate them?
Safety behaviors are subtle, or not so subtle. Things people do to try and prevent or manage panic in feared situations. They feel like they're helping, but they actually maintain the fear because you never fully learn you can cope without them.
Can you give examples?
Sure. Things like always carrying rescue medication, even if you rarely use it, always needing your phone, only going places with a safe person, constantly checking your pulse or scanning for exits, gripping onto something tightly, using excessive distraction like always listening to music.
Okay. Things you rely on to feel less anxious.
Exactly. And the sources stress that during exposure, these need to be identified and gradually dropped. Again, no relaxation techniques should be used during the exposure itself. You need to face the situation and the anxiety without these crutches to really learn that you're safe and capable. Otherwise, you might attribute your survival to the safety behavior, not your own coping ability.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like CBT is a very active, structured approach. And the data comparing it to treatment as usual was pretty striking.
It really was. Looking at the MGH source data, the percentage of people showing a significant response or even achieving remission was consistently higher in the CBT group compared to treatment as usual, both at 3 months and even more so at 12 months.
So significantly better outcomes with CBT.
Yeah, it really underscores why it's considered such a key treatment. And it can be used on its own as a way to potentially reduce or come off medication or used effectively alongside medication.
Speaking of which, medications were mentioned too.
Yes, briefly. Doctors might prescribe benzodiazepines, things like Xanax or Valium, for fast, short-term relief during an acute attack, but they carry risks of dependence, so they're usually used cautiously. Beta blockers can help manage some physical symptoms like racing heart. And SSRIs, the type of antidepressant, are often used longer term to help prevent attacks from happening as frequently.
But always under a doctor's guidance.
Absolutely. Strict adherence to prescription and doctor consultation is vital with any medication.
What about mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR? We hear a lot about mindfulness. Was that highlighted specifically for panic?
Well, one source discussed MBSR and mindfulness more broadly. It noted that while mindfulness practices seem generally beneficial for mental health, the specific evidence from high-quality studies on MBSR for generalized anxiety disorder was considered somewhat limited compared to treatments like CBT, according to that particular source. They suggested more research is needed to really pin down its specific effectiveness for GAD.
Okay, so promising, but maybe the specific evidence base for GAD panic is still developing compared to CBT. That contrasts a bit with some of the personal experiences from the online community, doesn't it?
It does, and that's often the case. People find what works for them, often combining things. Many community members swore by regular meditation and breathing for managing their anxiety day to day, emphasizing consistency. The thought work idea, challenging those anxious thoughts, came up a lot, which aligns perfectly with CBT's cognitive restructuring. Acceptance was another theme, learning not to fight it.
And exercise was a big one there too.
Huge. But what was also clear from the community discussion was an understanding that while these self-management tools are incredibly valuable for diagnosable conditions like panic disorder, professional help like therapy is often essential. They aren't always a complete substitute.
Which leads us nicely to, when should someone seek that professional help?
The guidance is pretty clear. If the panic attacks or anxiety are causing significant distress, if they're interfering with your daily life, your job, relationships, ability to go places, or if the self-help strategies just aren't cutting it, that's the time to reach out to a mental health professional.
And online therapy was mentioned as an accessible option for some.
Yes, definitely expanding access.
Yeah.
And one final really critical point that needs repeating: the medical warning.
Right, the symptom overlap.
Exactly. Because symptoms like chest pain, sweating, shortness of breath, and intense fear can mimic a heart attack or other serious medical issues. If you experience these and have any doubt whatsoever about the cause, you need to seek immediate medical attention. Don't assume it's just panic, especially if it's a new experience or feels different. Rule out the medical emergency first.
That is absolutely vital advice. Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground today, from really understanding the nuts and bolts of panic attacks and that crucial role of catastrophic thinking.
Yeah, through to all those immediate coping tools like breathing, grounding, acceptance.
And then the longer-term view, lifestyle factors, routines, and the really powerful evidence-based treatments like CBT, alongside medication options.
It really seems like recovery is possible for many people, often involving a mix of these strategies. And the key seems to be finding what works for you and then practicing it consistently. Whether it's the breathing, the thought challenging, the exposure work, consistency builds that resilience.
And maybe just being kind to yourself through the process. It sounds like challenging work.
Absolutely. Patience and self-compassion are so important. It takes time and effort to learn new ways of responding to such intense fear.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with: if misinterpreting these, basically harmless physical sensations can fuel so much fear and panic, how might practicing more general mindfulness of our body's signals, just noticing them without that immediate judgment or catastrophic story, like grounding encourages, how might that change how we react to everyday stress and discomfort too, not just panic?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. How much of our daily stress response is also fueled by how we interpret those little physical signals? Definitely food for thought.